So approaching the vehicle, we're looking for the 3 L's: leaning, leaks, and lights. First L, leaks. Check underneath for leaks, make sure we don't have any puddles. Then we're gonna check for leaning. Well, why would it be leaning? 3 reasons: flat tire, broken suspension, or an unevenly distributed load. Then we go to the lights. We got clearance lights up top. We wanna make sure that they're amber in color, not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, clean and free of debris and moisture, the right color amber. Then we got our front headlights, blinker lights, and 4 ways. Make sure they're not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, clean and free of debris and moisture. Make sure our license plate's visible and free of debris. Check that mirror bracket, make sure it's properly mounted and secured, not been broken or cracked. Then we come over to this side. I'll start out with general hoses and wires, okay? General hoses and wires, make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, no visible leaks, and no frayed or burnt wires. Then we'll go to the coolant reservoir. Make sure the coolant reservoir is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, with no visible leaks, and it's filled to operating range. Well, how would I check it? Either I can look through the sight dash, or if it's cool enough, I would check it through the top, okay? And then at the top up there, I have my alternator. No, bottom, right here, alternator. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Note that it's belt driven, and make sure I don't have any frayed wires. And beneath that, we got the water pump, where the big hose is going down to the water pump. Make sure the water pump doesn't have any visible leaks. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, and it's also belt driven. So I'd go ahead and inspect the belt. I want to make sure that the belt has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, and no more than 3/4 of an inch of play if I push on it. All right. Now let's go to the other side. We'll start out with the fluids. The oil fill tube and dipstick. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. We talk about the process for checking the oil. We pull the dipstick, wipe it off, put it back in, pull it back out, and make sure the fluid level is in operating range. Okay, right here we have the windshield washer reservoir. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted, secured with no visible leaks, and it's also filled to operating range. Then I have my power steering reservoir. Make sure my power steering reservoir is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, no visible leaks, and filled to operating range. You can check it through the sight glass from the top. Now this hose takes me to an item that you can't see, which will be the power steering pump. Want to make sure the power steering pump, first note that it's gear driven, make sure it has no visible leaks, and that it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I go to my steering linkage. Make sure my steering linkage has no excessive play. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Make sure I have no debris inside the U-joints. Then I go down to my steering gearbox. It's gear driven. Make sure it has no visible leaks, and make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my pitman arm. Make sure my pitman arm is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My castle nut and cotter pins. I'm gonna make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I got my drag link. Make sure my drag link is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my upper and lower steering arms. Make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And lastly, on the suspension, I got my tie rod. I wanna make sure that my tie rod is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Okay, from there we're gonna go into suspension. Start out with my front and then check my rear. Spring mounts, make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I have my leaf springs, make sure they're not scissoring. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my U-bolts. Make sure my U-bolts are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And my shock absorber. Make sure it has no visible leaks, and make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. From there, I'm gonna go into my braking. On the inside of the frame, I have my air compressor. Note that it's gear driven, make sure it has no audible leaks, and make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my brake hose. It's a rubber item, so I wanna make sure it has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured with no audible leaks. Brake chamber and clamp. Make sure it has no audible leaks, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My slack adjuster and my push rod. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And make sure I don't have more than 1 inch of play when I tug on it. Then on the inside here, I have my brake linings. Make sure my brake linings are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I'm looking for 3 things. Make sure there's no signs of heat stress, not worn dangerously thin, less than 1/4 of an inch, and no fluids on them. Then I have my brake drum on the outside of that. 2 things. Make sure it has no heat stress and no fluid on it either. And make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secure. Then I have my inner rim. Make sure it has no illegal welds, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have the sidewalls of my tire. Make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted, secure, no audible leaks. Then I have the top of my tire. Make sure it's worn evenly with a minimum of 4/32 of an inch of tread depth with no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted, secure, no audible leaks. Then I have my outer rim. Make sure it has no illegal welds, no rust trails, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I go into my lug nuts. I want to make sure they're all tight, they're all present, with no metal shavings and no shiny thread, and not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My hub seal and cap. I want to make sure it has no visible leaks and that it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I also want to make sure it's filled the operating range. I can check it through the sight glass, or I can take the cap off. Then lastly, I have my valve stem and cap. I want to make sure my valve stem and cap has no audible leaks and it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secure. Here's where I'd use a tire pressure gauge to check and make sure that my tires aired up properly in operating range. Then from there, we're going to go on to our mirror bracket. Make sure my mirror bracket is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secure. Outer door handle, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secure. Inner door handle, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secure. My door hinges, pull up on the door, make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secure. My weather stripping, make sure it has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secure. My grab bar to enter and exit the vehicle is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Work my way down. My stairs, make sure that they're clean and free of debris and so I won't slip on them. And make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My gas tank, make sure it has no visible leaks, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my my gas tank cap. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Additionally, I want to make sure that it has a rubber seal with no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, and a safety chain in place. Okay, from there, I'm gonna go to my trailer bed. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. It has 50% DOT reflective tape, all right? My tarp bar. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I work my way down to the frame. Make sure my frame is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured with no bolts missing and no illegal welds. And then beneath that, I have my drive shaft. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, and no debris inside the U-joints. All right? From there, I'm gonna go on to my brake chamber and clamps. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured with no audible leaks. Then you can see my brake hoses. Make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, no audible leaks. And on the back side of my chambers, I have slack adjuster and push rods. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured with no more than 1 inch of play. And let's see here. All right, let's go ahead and go to, I'll finish up on the inside of here. I got my brake linings or pads. Make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured with 3 things. No heat stress, no fluid on them, and not worn dangerously thin. Then I have my brake drums on the outside, no fluid on them, no heat stress, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Inner rim, no illegal welds, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have the sidewalls of my tires. Make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, no audible leaks. The tops of my tires, I want to make sure that they're worn evenly with a minimum of 2/32 of an inch tread depth, with no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured. And on the inside of here, I have my dual rims. I want to make sure that my dual rims sit flush against each other with no daylight in between, because these don't have any buzz spacers, and not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I also want to make sure I don't have any debris or dead animals in between my dual rims. I want to come out to my outer rim. Make sure my outer rim has no illegal welds, no rust trails, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My lug nuts, make sure they're all tight. No metal shavings, no shiny thread, no rust trails, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My axle nuts are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, no metal shavings, no shiny threads. And then my seal, make sure that it has no leaks, axle seal. Then I go on to my valve stem and cap, make sure it has no audible leaks, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I use a tire pressure gauge to check and make sure that my tires aired up properly. Now let's get the suspension. I have my front and my rear spring mounts. Make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And leaf springs, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. No scissoring. These are U-bolts. These are straight bolts. But we want to make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. All right. Got the suspension. Then I go into my marker lights. Got a red in the rear, amber in the front. Make sure that they're not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured with no debris and no moisture inside. Come to the back of my truck. Make sure my tailgate is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I should have 100% DOT reflective tape. Make sure that my latches are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my tail lights, brake lights, blinker lights. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. License plate, make sure it's visible, clean and free of debris. Then I got my mud flaps. Make sure my mud flaps have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, and no more than 8 inches from the surface. So now I'm gonna go into my coupling. I have my pintle hook, the mounting bolts. Make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. All 6 of them are present. And then I have my, this is the latch. Make sure my latch is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, and in the lock position. Okay. Then I'm gonna come out to my pigtails. Make sure my electric pigtails are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured to the truck and the trailer. Make sure the hose has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, and no burnt or frayed wires. Then I go to my emergency glad hand. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. The rubber seal has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, and no audible leaks. And then the hose itself has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured. And while I'm over here, I'm gonna talk about the D-rings and the safety chains. Make sure my D-rings are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My safety chains are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Both of them are latch on both D-rings. Then on the other side, we can go to the emergency service line. Make sure it's not doesn't have any abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured to the truck and the trailer. Make sure the glad hand has a rubber seal with no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, no audible leaks. Then we'll go on to our jack handle. Make sure it's in the stove position, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then our pad. Make sure it's fully raised, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. We'll go to our trailer side. Make sure our trailer side is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. It has amber marker lights in the front, red towards the rear. And also make sure it has at least 50% DOT reflective tape. Then underneath, I'm gonna get my cross members and my floor. Make sure my cross members are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted, secured, nothing missing, and no holes in my floor. All right. Then we'll come back. I have my torsion bar. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I have my front and rear spring mounts. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Leaf springs. Make sure they're not scissoring. Not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then my U-bolts. Make sure my U-bolts are not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. That does it for suspension. Then I'm going to go on to brakes. On the inside here, I got my brake chamber and clamp. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. No audible leaks. Then on the back side, I have my slack adjuster and push rod. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted, secured, no more than 1 inch of play. And then I have my brake hoses. Make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted, secured, no audible leaks. And then on the top up there, I have my air tank. Make sure my air tank is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted, secured, with no audible leaks. And let's finish out the brakes. On the inside of here, I have my brake linings. Make sure my brake linings, 3 things, have no heat stress, no fluid on them, not worn dangerously thin, less than 1/4 of an inch. Then I have my brake drum. Make sure it has no fluid on it, no heat stress, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted, secured. Inner rim, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, no illegal welds. Then I have the sidewalls of my tire. Make sure the sidewalls of my tire have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured. Tops of my tire, make sure they're worn evenly. Have a minimum of 2/32 of an inch tread depth with no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured. My dual rims, make sure they're sitting flush against each other and not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. No debris or dead animals inside. Come out and get the outer rim. No illegal wells, no rust trails, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my lug nuts. Make sure they're all present, all tight, no metal shavings, no shiny thread, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my hub sealing cap. Make sure it has no visible leaks, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And feel the operating range. You can check it through the sight glass or through the top. And then I have my valve stem and cap. Make sure my valve stem and cap is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, has no audible leaks. And this is where I'll use a tire pressure gauge to check and make sure my tires aired up properly. I'm walking back. I have my mud flaps. Make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, and no more than 8 inches from the surface. Coming on back, I have my trailer ABS light. Make sure it's not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, the right color amber, with no moisture and no debris and no moisture inside. My rear reflector, not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, and the right color, which is red. Then I have the rear of my trailer. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And I have my brake lights, tail lights, blinker lights. Make sure they're not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, clean and free of debris and moisture. Then I want to make sure that my license plate is visible, clean and free of debris. And then we have our ramps. Make sure that they're in the locked stow position, not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. They also have DOT tape as well. Then I have my battery box. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. You want to check the batteries on the inside. Make sure that there's no corrosion around the terminal and no burnt or frayed wires. Then I have my exhaust. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, with no soot present along the piping, which could indicate a leak. The only place soot that should be present is at the tip. And lastly, I have my air tanks. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, with no audible leaks.